Watching the Chinese government's reaction to the Hong Kong protests is kind of ironic. It's clear that they love nothing more than to blame America for these protests. It's the US's fault that Hong Kong citizens are in the streets calling for major changes to the Hong Kong government, disrespecting the Chinese national anthem, and disrupting city life. But it's funny because, in some ways, the Chinese government has a point. Don't get me wrong, the Chinese government is wrong about a lot too. It's not America's government that's driving all these people into the streets, paying them to disrupt society, forcing them into challenging the Communist Party. No, the US government has actually done very little to tangibly support the protests. But America and the ideals of American democracy are very clearly a motivator to the people of Hong Kong, who want one of the most fundamental democratic rights of them all, the right to choose their own leaders without external influence. It's not Americans visiting Hong Kong who are proudly flying the US flag and singing the national anthem. It's people who actually live there. It's not undercover US agents who are talking about how the stars and stripes represent the freedoms that are currently lacking in Hong Kong. It's people who live there that understand the American flag represents freedom from tyranny. And truthfully, there's a lot in common between the Hong Kong protests now and the American Revolution. Take the extradition bill, which was only recently withdrawn by Carrie Lam, chief executive of Hong Kong's government. The idea that Hong Kong's own government was pushing for a bill that would allow Hong Kongers to be tried in the notoriously corrupt and secretive Chinese judicial system is one that America's founding fathers would have been absolutely disgusted about. All you have to do is read the Declaration of Independence, where the colonists flat out accused Britain of depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury and transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offences. If that doesn't sound to you like China and Hong Kong now, you might not have heard about Wing-kee, the owner of a Hong Kong bookstore who was abducted by Chinese agents in 2015 and sent to prison for 8 months, or his 4 colleagues who were also arrested without any kind of a trial and subjected to vicious interrogations. Hong Kong is set to go fully under Chinese control in 2047, so in reality, Hong Kong protesters are fighting the clock to ensure that their voices are heard and their rights are protected in a government which they should have the ultimate say in. China has already violated aspects of the one country, two systems policy that allows Hong Kong to have its own executive, legislative, and independent judicial powers. But the truth is, despite all of those infractions, life in mainland China is way worse. The Chinese government jails and tortures the Uyghur Muslims, they use a mass surveillance system to implement a social credit score that sounds like something out of a dystopian novel, they jail and imprison human rights defenders, and they block journalists from even talking to independent political candidates. It's been amazing to watch this summer as millions of Hong Kongers have come out to protest the Chinese government in what's been the largest organized opposition to CCP leadership since the Tiananmen Square massacre back in 1989. An extradition bill might have been the catalyst that launched these protests, but the truth is, this fight has been about so much more. It's about China eroding the rights that they promised to Hong Kong back in 1997. It's about Hong Kong's own government listening to more to Xi Jinping's directions than the will of its own people. It's about Hong Kong citizens who have come to believe that the only way to get their voices heard is to come out in massive numbers and demand that the government actually do what they want. When China blames America for stirring up the Hong Kong people, maybe they're actually blaming America's founders. Maybe the true culprits are the people who set the example of rebelling against an unjust imperial power to protect their liberties. Maybe the ideals set forth in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence are more attractive to Hong Kong citizens than any money from the US government would be. Maybe the Hong Kong citizens who literally take their last will and testament with them as they go to the front lines of the protests are hearing Patrick Henry's words in their heads as they do. Is life so dear, or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the cost of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty, or give me death.